Welcome back. This is JE Live. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and joining me is Josh at Joshios Tweets, my buddy here who, together, I thought we put together one of the best previews people could have asked for when it came to that Carolina game. So, I saw the comments, and everyone wanted you back, or at least everybody that I looked at wanted you back. So, here we are doing it again. The ultimate preview for Rams versus Bears should be quite the game, and I'm excited to talk about it, man. Welcome back.
Thank you, man. It was honestly an honor. And I heard the questions about the microphone. Hopefully, it sounds better today. I'm wearing one right on my chest, and I'm excited to talk about another game. You know, every week you get to go beyond week 18 is a game to cherish. And I'm excited to talk about it and break down what's to come.
Absolutely. So you have put together a really nice little presentation here. We're going to do exactly what we did last time. We're going to start at quarterback. We're going to start with Matthew Stafford and Caleb Williams, comparing them based on coverages. And let's get right into it. But this time, we're going to actually show you the work instead of just telling you. So here we are. We got the work up here. So talk to me. Josh, what are your thoughts kind of going into this game based on, what we have here?
Yeah, something I want to point out is that last week we talked about Matthew Stafford being great against cover zero, but in this case, Caleb Williams is actually great as well. Obviously, it's almost double the amount for Matt, but Caleb Williams is still top 10 in this metric, and you have to be careful when you're blitzing Caleb Williams. Not only that, but also because of his ability to escape the pocket and potentially have big gains on the ground as well.
Yeah, Caleb's interesting because, everybody's talking about you got to get pressure, but if you get pressure and you have him going outside the pocket and you go on the run, what I've found more than ever is that he likes to throw off platform than on it. And I found that really interesting. It's why I think it's funny, you do have your Bears fans out there that are like, I want it to snow. It's going to be hard for the Rams. I'm like, if anything, I think a snow game benefits the Rams because it basically neutralizes Caleb Williams' strength. But let's talk about it. So the Rams predominantly run cover three. They run it probably more than any team or as much as any team in the league. That said, this past week, they didn't do that. And they didn't mainly because Bryce Young was throwing the football. And like you mentioned, he's typically trying to throw deep down the field. He's top 7 in the league in deep ball, and he's trying to go to the sidelines. And so, therefore, you're going to play cover 2. And we saw more cover 2 last week from the Rams. So with Caleb Williams, and looking at this, do you expect the Rams to stick with what they've done all year or kind of do a little bit of what they did against Carolina and adjusting to the quarterback?
Yeah, and we'll see this later on in the video. But Caleb Williams struggles in intermediate game. So he's either going to be throwing it short or throwing it deep. So that's something to keep in mind with Colston Loveland, especially. His emergence is something that stood out to me in the last 6 weeks of the season and in the playoff game as well. I mean, this is a rookie tight end, and he's playing as a 5-year veteran. When I look at him play, not only in the receiving game, but also when he's blocking in the run game as well. So that you have to keep in mind. So he's going to look for Colston Loveland in the short throws, I believe. And he can go deep as well. We've seen that. But I think that's going to be a priority for Ben Johnson to have to make sure that Caleb Williams has a guy to go to at all times. And that guy is going to be Colston Loveland.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Over 35 targets in his last 3 games. Clearly, that's the guy Caleb's going to. And to be fair, you want to take him away. Well, he's still going to have Luther Burden. He's still going to have DJ Moore. And, he's still going to have Romo Dunze and Cole Kmet and the running back. So he's got a lot of weapons over there, does Caleb Williams. Matthew Stafford, what are you expecting him to see the most of against the Bears?
Well, if I were the Bears, I would not be showing cover 3, and we saw that on the final drive against Carolina. For some reason, they had barely run cover 3 all game, but the last drive of the game, they really exclusively ran cover 3, and Matthew Stafford went right down the field, only one incompletion, and that was a drop by Devontae Adams. So if I were the Bears, I would avoid cover 3 because Matthew Stafford was struggling, and it could be because of the injury, but As soon as they pulled out cover three, I mean, he was unstoppable. There was way too much cushion. And ultimately, they're going to need to press and make it easy, not make it easy for some of these guys, because otherwise, Puka's just going to sit in the zone, pick up 8 yards, and move down the field. They will do this every single time if that's given to them. You're going to have to press some of our receivers, but also with someone like Devontae Adams, that's risky too, because if he beats that one-on-one coverage, he's gone. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the Tampa Bay game. We've seen that in other games, in the Eagles game. So it's kind of a battle that you have to pick and choose, right? There's positives and cons to both options, and I'm sure that they're going to have a defense ready that they believe will stop this, but will it be enough?
That's a good question. Stafford also annihilates cover 0 and cover 6, but I feel like the Bears are going to run more of that cover 1, which is still something Stafford's good against. So, that's something to keep in mind there. Any final thoughts before we move on to the next page?
We saw everyone on national media, on Twitter, talking about the weather. Matthew Stafford was still throwing it downfield in the Philadelphia game last year. So I do not think that will be a complete factor. Do I think it could impact it? Yes, but I still think the deep ball is there for both teams if they so choose to do it.
I like that. And I mean, I do agree. And it is one of those games that it feels like a lot of people have blowouts and all that, or not blowouts, but shootouts. I mean, hell, it's on the thumbnail, right? Chicago shootout. And that's what we could be looking at. With the, colder weather, I don't know if it's going to be as much of a shootout as everybody is making out. Like when I heard Alex Smith say they're going to hang 50 on them, I was like, I don't know about that one, but I would take it. I hope Alex Smith is right. But I don't believe that to be the case. Throw location based. So this is based on Caleb Williams and Matthew Stafford throwing to a certain location, whether it's down the seam, outside the numbers, or between the hashes. We just went over this last week with Bryce Young, and we saw that Bryce Young, between the hashes, that's kind of where he's trying to live. And that was a big deal. So that said, kind of looking at this, Caleb Williams is not really terrible at any of these. He's actually pretty successful down the seam. He's pretty successful between the hashes. And, he takes a dip, outside the numbers, but he can still do it. So what are your thoughts when you look at this data right here?
Yeah, something I want to keep in mind just to go over what EPA is. EPA is expected points added, and we're averaging it per play. So what you see, all these numbers, they're all positive. So basically, Matthew Stafford and Caleb Williams are contributing every single play. It's just to what level. So we see Matthew Stafford down the seam. That's an insane amount. Every play, he's contributing around 0.44 points of offense. So even though Caleb Williams isn't exactly top 10 in these metrics, he's still posting positive numbers in that regard. And if you look at between the hashes, 61% success rate, that is what stands out to me right there. So even though he's not ranked the highest between the hashes, that means super majority of plays, he's seeing success between the hashes, and we might look for that.
Yeah, I think when you look at this, I mean, obviously we know what Stafford is, right? We know he's going to rip it down the seam. We know that he's good outside the numbers, and between the hashes, he's actually struggled this year. We mentioned that last time. Caleb Williams, it doesn't seem like he's, dominant in any of these, but he's not bad in any of these. Like, he's still staying in the middle of the pack or the top half of it. So that's something that's interesting. Again, the success rate there, Caleb Williams at a 43.1% outside the numbers. That's intriguing. But like you brought up with Colston Loveland, it seems like he's going to try to go down the field and he's going to go down the seam. And that's where Colston Loveland has been making him pay, not necessarily outside the numbers. So that is something there. And then situation based, this is going to be based on the throw length. And we talked about this last week. And Matthew Stafford is just so consistent, top 10 in all of these categories. Caleb Williams is the worst quarterback in the NFL at throwing intermediate, according to EPA. And that checks out on film, Josh. It really does. I mean, you see a guy that he can hit the home run, but when you need him to just get a base hit, it doesn't seem like he can do that. You need, the big dunk the flashy play, whatever it was, the Michael Jordan play they're calling it, on 4th and 8. That's one of the greatest throws I've ever seen in my life. And then follow it up, the next throw, he just outright misses the guy wide open on the very next throw. And it's funny because this is going to be on NBC, and it's the 6:30 game. So I'd imagine we're going to get Collinsworth. And Collinsworth, I've listened to him call games with Caleb Williams, and it drives him insane because he's missing layup throws. And most of the time, these are over the middle in the intermediate game. So very interesting stuff here. I mean, it does kind of tell the full story, and it really does back up the film. But what are your biggest takeaways from this aspect?
Yeah, exactly that. 32 out of 34 qualifying QBs, he ranks in the intermediate game. That's not great, but I want to point out what Ben Johnson has installed, a completely new offense. And this is something that most second-year quarterbacks probably don't have to deal with. And I want to make something clear. His deep ball accuracy has significantly improved. It's top 3 and most improved in between last year and this year. So I think next season, intermediate game will be a priority for Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams and figuring out what needs to happen here. But like you said, on tape, there are obvious misses and miraculous throws. So he's a bit of a, I don't even know how to describe it, because you see throws that you don't even know how are possible. And then you also see throws that you cannot believe were missed that bad. So it's really a hit or miss. And that's what I'm kind of worried about, because you're going to see him turn on in the fourth quarter. And if you don't have a big enough lead, or if you're not able to stay in the game, that is a concern. But I do believe that he will improve. But at this point, I believe it will be a factor in this game, and he will struggle in that area. That is my prediction.
Yeah, I think he'll struggle in that area too. And I think the Rams are going to try and disguise some things in that secondary to kind of force his hand to throw, and get into the intermediate and really push him, because this chart says that Caleb Williams sucks at throwing intermediate doesn't mean that he knows that. he's going to let it rip, especially in the middle of the game. You're not going to have Caleb Williams sitting there like, I was going to pull the trigger, but I'm 32nd in EPA intermediate, right? So it's definitely something that'll be there. And I do expect, the Rams to at least generate one turnover, because Caleb did take care of the football better than maybe I anticipated, with only 9 interceptions when including the postseason this year. But how many of those were dropped interceptions? I mean, he had quite a few. And so I do think that will come into play. By the way, we touched off air a little bit, just getting off track a little bit here. You were mentioning Nick McLeod, and we'll get into that later. He did not practice yet again on Thursday. So he's somebody that we're going to talk about. DJ Moore and Romo Nunze were limited. Everyone else played or practiced, rather. That's on the active roster. The Rams, they fully practiced, except Jimmy Garoppolo randomly just shows up with a back. He did not practice today. Kevin Dotson was limited, and even Jordan Whittington was a full participant, as well as Darius Williams, who's back from having a child. So there you go. Like, for the most part, everybody's going to be healthy for this game that is on the active roster. And if they've already been placed on the IR, then they're not. It's that simple. But moving on to the running backs. And this is an interesting one here because, these two are very similar. Very similar running back rooms. I would say Monangai has a little bit more pop than Kyron Williams as a runner. But I think Kyron breaks more tackles, and I think he has better balance. Swift, I think, is more explosive, and he's well put together as compared to Blake Corum. So looking at this, and you got the no stack box here, and you got the stack box. Well, it looks like nobody has gone against the stack box more than Kyron Williams. That said, when it comes to no stack box, no one has gone against a no stack box more than Kyron Williams. And this comes on first down. Now, this, of course, has happened because the Rams, they have threatened with the pass. And in doing so, it does keep defenses honest and keeps them light up front. So that's the kind of intriguing thing there. But then when you go into 13 or 12 personnel, Now defenses are going to play more base. So, what say you when you look at this? What are your biggest takeaways?
My biggest takeaway is that I agree that these two run games are very similar, but there's one particular difference that I want to point out. Both teams, when they're not facing a stacked box, so what that means is how many players are in the box in the immediate vicinity of where they're going to run. When they're not facing that, they're actually both very effective, both top 10 in that metric. But when you stack the box, when you put extra players at the line of scrimmage, the Bears start to struggle. They're ranked 17th, while the Rams still are top 10. So that's what you're going to see. Kyren Williams is built to play in a stacked box. In addition, he can break tackles, like you said. He's not going to be the explosive running back 60 yards. That's just not going to happen. But he's able to break the little tackles and keep moving forward. That's what you need to do. What we cannot go behind the chains. The Rams cannot do that. You need 1st and 10 to become at least 7 and 7, 2nd and 2nd, or better. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues. And especially when you're getting stuffed behind the line of scrimmage, that's a huge concern because it just makes the pass game harder. And it makes the what you can call more limited. And it makes it easier for the defense. And that's just what you don't want to do. But ultimately, I believe that we should stack the box against the Bears, especially if Caleb Williams is not having a great game at the beginning. If you see him start to explode, then you revert. But to start the game, I believe that the Rams should stack the box.
And this kind of goes with my theory that playing Kyren Williams to start games and having him kind of wear down defenses or at least keep him honest sets up Blake Corum. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree because not only is the success rate based on the running backs, but this is based on the play action and this is based on the threat of the pass. And this is something that all teams have to consider. If they want to stack the box, McVay is going to call a play where they throw it down your face. And keep in mind, wherever you are bringing players from to stack the box, there's no longer a player there to cover the field. And Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay know exactly where that player was, and they're going to target that location. It's the same thing for the blitz. When someone blitzes, that's where you throw the ball to. It's the same thing when you're adding an extra run defender. Wherever they were supposed to cover, that's where Matthew Stafford is going to throw the ball.
Yeah, no, it very well put. I think people forget that too. When you're sending a blitz, I mean, that's the reason why veterans tend to be really good against the blitz is because they're poised in the pocket. They have a lot of experience. They don't they don't fold. Whereas rookies or younger quarterbacks tend to fold because they're overthinking. And the reality is, any quarterback, it's honestly a help to go up against a blitz because now okay, when that guy comes and brings pressure, now I have that guy open because somebody has to get over there and I have an advantage. But that's where pressure, lack of experience kind of comes in. It's why some guys are really good against it and some guys aren't. And Stafford shreds the blitz. And so kind of similar to what you're talking about here, if you are going to go light, say you want to go light here and you're like, okay, well, we have to prepare for the Rams passing attack. And this is what has made them the number one offense in the league. Nobody scores more than the Rams. The reason being is because when you zig, they zag. And it's like kind of like, shot or stabbed. How would you like to die today, on the field, right? And that's just what happens. Pick your poison, because if you want to sell out to stop the pass and you think, and Dennis Allen is going to try and do that. He's not going to, I don't believe he's going to stack the box. I think he's going to try and force turnovers. I think the way they're going to play this is almost like a gambler because they have two gamblers in the secondary. Guys that can make plays on the football, but guys that also give up touchdowns. So that's what they're going to be doing. And so I think, when you have those opportunities and, they're trying to, maybe put 6 in the backfield or whatever and make it harder for Stafford, the Rams will just run against that. And we've started to see them kind of running out of that delayed handoff, that, shotgun. And they've had some success on those kind of throwaway runs. I mean, Kyren Williams continues to truck along. Blake Corum has the explosion, and that could be a problem. And I think you see right here, I mean, the first down with no stack box, this is likely right after a conversion. Obviously it's first down in general, so maybe they come out with, no stack box to start. But most of the time, I would imagine that this is after a nice third down conversion or something like that. And now it's like, okay, nice passing play. Now we're going to run the football because now they have to expect I got Devontae Adams, I got Puka Nacua, I got a tight end room that has 19 touchdowns on the season, and I can throw that football. And then after that, on second down, you got Blake Corum who's coming in here now, putting up 0.43 EPA per play, which is just insane, with a 66.7 success rate percentage on second down. Blake Corum is better on second down than he is on first. That tells me that something set that up. Was that a pass on the previous play? Probably. And so that, I think, is how you're really going to generate opportunities. And you're going to see different opportunities here, because here's the thing, and this is important. I know Jalen Johnson is an absolute stud at corner, but the Bears don't have, in my opinion, the same level of a secondary that the Panthers have. And I think it allows the Panthers to do a little bit more. Evero got a little creative, and so they're able to kind of keep guys up front and stack that box and try and stop the run, because they believe that if I put Mike Jackson on an island and, I go and I put, Trayvon Merrick, I know it didn't work out on the final play, but I could put him on a tight end and he could do his job there. And then I got JC Horn. Well, now I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. The Bears, they're giving up a lot of yards this year, so they're going to have to be a little bit more creative, and they might have to use more of their assets in the back end of the secondary instead of just throwing them at the kitchen sink at the running back. So that's kind of how I interpret that. Very interesting, but man, two really good running back rooms for sure.
Agreed. 100% on everything you said. And just keep in mind that this defense of the Bears feasts on turnovers. On all of their unsuccessful drives that the defense has caused, 30% of them were due to a turnover, and that's the highest in the league. So this defense will feast on that, as you mentioned. But if they don't get turnovers, it's going to look ugly. They're not good in the run defense, and we'll talk about that. And they're not great in pass coverage. So if they're not generating turnovers, which, again, the last few weeks, the Rams have given up the ball almost every game. So that is a concern. But if that doesn't happen, I'm not sure how they stop this offense of the Rams.
Yeah. It's not going to be easy. Light box. Rams have the 5th and Bears are 4th in that. And then stack box, like you mentioned, the Bears struggle. They're 17th in the league and the Rams are 6th. So that's a huge stack box advantage. And that is more so weathered. That's more hardened for any sort of scenario and any sort of situation. And if you're looking for the run game that is more likely to translate in a game like this, where this could get, run happy and say it just becomes really cold and it's hard to throw the football for whatever reason, maybe the wind gets to be ridiculous. Well, the Rams are more likely to translate into success than the Bears. Because like you're saying, the Bears, a lot of what they do with the pass manufactures and sets up the run, because now it's forcing defenses to be light up front. And it makes it easier on these running backs who essentially they're going up against, linebackers. They're getting that second level, and now it's like they got a corner, and they're just running through those arm tackles. So that can be the issue there. Run direction, I love that you have this here. Really fascinated by this. So let's see here. We got left tackle. That's Alec Jackson, and that's a 0.28 EPA. That's very good for Kyren Williams. And you actually have a negative for Monangai, which I find really interesting, because Monangai, the 18 that he had were likely with Benedette. That's when he was getting the majority of his carries, was when Swift was banged up, and they were going with Theo Benedette, who is going to start at left tackle, and that's why I find it intriguing. DeAndre Swift has a plus EPA. Blake Corum has a plus EPA. And then left end, those are going to be more of your outside stretch runs. Does not surprise me that the highest EPA here is Blake Corum. That's what he wants to do. And by the way, with TJ Edwards out, I think he'll be able to do that against this linebacker room. I think he'll be able to get there. Against Seattle, they're too quick. They stop you. I mean, that's just the reality. So I think that'll be huge. Kyron's had good luck there. Swift and Monangai do not have success there. So I find that really interesting. And then up the middle, you got Monangai, which makes a lot of sense. Downhill runner. He really uses his pads well. gets great pad level and just makes you pay. And then Blake Corum is a little bit surprising here, but we've seen a lot of moments where Blake Corum, it seems like he's stopped and he doesn't have the vision of Kyron Williams, but sometimes he just kind of just keeps himself upright, trucks it along, and you got the rest of the offensive line kind of carrying him like a convoy. And we've seen that quite a few times. We saw that last week. We saw that against the Cardinals. But what are your biggest takeaways on this? I think the most obvious thing here that the tape supports is how good Blake Corum is running to the outside.
I believe that Blake Corum is the best out of all of these running backs running to the outside. But also, I want you to keep in mind what McVay changed this season on the distribution of how he uses his running backs. He's almost using them back to back on different drives. So one drive he'll employ Blake, the other drive he'll employ Kyron. And Kyron is a great running back. But the truth of the matter is that when he plays 90% of the snaps, he's going to be less effective than if he plays 60%, with Blake Corum taking 40%. So this is where Blake Corum has got to shine. Not only is he playing more, but also he's not playing too much where he would get tired. So he's really going to be energized on every single snap that he plays. And this is what we're seeing live this year compared to last year. Towards the end of the games, I felt that Kyron Williams was getting tired last year, and that's totally okay. I mean, most running backs are not expected to play the amount that he did. And as to what he do, because he also does pass protection. He was asked to do a lot, and I think this has made this offense a lot better, actually involving Blake Corum in this offense. I know he was hurt for the postseason. He broke his forearm or something of that sent him out, but I believe this is looking really good. And Kyle Monangai, draft steal. This guy looks great for the Bears, and I'm not sure many people were expecting that. I'm sure some people saw him and pointed it out, but I was shocked to see the level of success of Kyle Monangai, and I believe that having two good running backs makes all the difference, and they have that 100%.
Yeah, and you of course you got DeAndre Swift with like that familiarity with Ben Johnson, which I do think helps. But Kyle Monangai, like I'm not saying Swift can't break tackles and he can't run with power, but Monangai is power. And when you watch him, in college, I mean, he was somebody that felt like he would give you a really high floor and a low ceiling, and I think that's what we're getting right away. He's ready to go. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Zach Stacy with the St. Louis Rams back in the day. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing, a guy that just can bounce off tackles. I think he's a little bit more, I'm going to be the wrecking ball than the pinball like Zach Stacy was. I think he's just a wrecking ball. So they haven't really used him as much lately. So that'll be interesting to see how much they use him in this one. But the wide receiver tight end combos, we're going to start off with the Bears here. Okay. Because the run percentage, I love this. This kind of gives you a little tell. And you should know, when you have Durham Smythe lined up, they're running the football more often than not. That's like their blocking tight end. Cole Kmet is kind of moved into a blocking tight end role. I could see him getting traded at some point, but that's a different conversation. Really good, route runner, really good receiving threat. But, I mean, Colston Loveland has taken that over. So, looking at this, basically what we're seeing is when Durham Smythe is on the field, they run the ball over 60% of the time. Cole Kmet is normally on the field when they run the football 46% of the time. And then you got Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. They don't run the ball much when Jade Walker's out there. And they don't run the ball as much when Luther Burden is out there. So, looking at this, do you feel like the Bears can mask this well and be a little bit, less predictable this Sunday? Do you think that we're going to see more runs when Luther Burden's in there and Colston Loveland, or do you think they're going to stay with their tried and true formula?
I think they stay with it, honestly, because the last few games of offensive success, they put it in the hands of the guys who catch it. Colston Loveland has excelled as a receiver. He is a tight end, but he's excelled as a receiver. And some of these players, I think, are better for the run, and they still have success. So why not do it? I don't think there's any reason for them to disguise, but I always think that's a possibility at any given play that you might see Cole Kmet in a spot where you don't expect him, and he's going to block, and then he breaks out. And you saw that. They ran a fake screen. in the playoffs. And they had it ready for the screen, and then they kept going. You just kept going right into the end zone. And that is something that you could see success in. And obviously, if you do it again, they're going to be expecting that. But if you have it one time ready for that specific moment, you need a score, that's something they can pull out. And that's a player, Cole Kmet, or one of these players that you wouldn't expect. And that's going to happen if they need it.
On the flip side of that, with the Rams, it really does feel like Davis Allen is the one tell. Like they're pretty much going to run the football when he's out there, especially lately, because he's not out there nearly as much as he used to be. And he's dropped quite a few passes lately, so they've kind of just moved him into a run block and roll. But really fascinating stuff that Konate Mumfield is out there more than like a Puka Nakua or any of those guys. I mean, the thing I like about this is you see the disparity between the two. Like you don't see a 60, you see a 54. A lot of these, I mean, all these guys are above 40 here. These guys are still above 40, but you don't have any like obvious ones except for really Tutu Atwell and Xavier Smith. I mean, Devontae Adams, they can still run the ball. They can still run it with Higbee, Puka, Whittington, although I don't remember the last time Whittington was on offense at this point. But yeah, it's interesting. And the one that I want to focus the most on is this right here. Terrence Ferguson, who is arguably this is really close to where Parkinson is on designed runs and rush attempts. So what are your thoughts on this? Because I feel like they've done enough where they've kind of, disguised Terrence Ferguson enough where now he blocks so well now. Like you have to be aware that he's on the field, but you also can't be left thinking that it's going to be a passing play every time he comes in. Like he's no longer that guy that like when Tutu Atwell comes in, he's either going to take the top off the defense and be the clear out guy, or they're actually going to throw it to him, which is very rare. But they're not really doing anything else with him. With Terrence Ferguson, that's how it used to be. Like he came in and you knew, okay, maybe he's going to draw a double team. Maybe he'll draw a pass interference, or they'll just throw it to him. But they're not bringing him in to not use him. But now it feels like they've just integrated him into what they do. What say you, Josh? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, when we look at 13 personnel, and the reason why you see Davis Allen so high up on this list is because in the regular season, Davis Allen was on the field for every 13 personnel play. He's one of two Rams to be on the field for every 13 personnel play, and I thought that was surprising, him and Steve Avila. So that's sort of the reason why his rush attempt is so high, because if you look at 13 personnel of the Rams, the rush attempt is sitting around that mark, around 55%. But what I love to see is Terrence Ferguson getting more involved in the run game, because a lot of these big explosive plays, he has gone to pretend to block for the run game and kind of just released and went further. And he was almost wide open on some of these 30-yard targets. And it's just great to see. And I believe that he's the future of our tight ends room. And I hope that Terrence Ferguson is able to play this weekend. I know he's been dealing with a hamstring that he pulled around 2 weeks ago, but I do believe that he is a game changer. I believe that Colby Parkinson is a great tight end, but Sean McVay at times has to scheme him open. I don't think Terrence Ferguson needs that. I believe that Terrence Ferguson can go deep down the field on his own with no help from the scheme, and that's what you want to see this weekend.
No, I like that. I definitely like that. I think Ferguson, that's why I went and proclaimed that I think he's going to be the greatest Rams tight end ever, because he's got this skill set already. And the biggest thing for me when I was watching the film, this guy can make plays after the catch. He can go deep down the field. The first thing, and this is something that my buddy Jesse brought up, who's an Oregon guy that I do the NFC West Roundtable with. And he said there was after he suffered that injury, he got that really hard hit. I forget what it was. He said after that, the confidence on those bang, bang plays wasn't there. He wasn't coming down with the football. He would get, he would hear footsteps. So he'd have those drops in contested catch situations. And now he's not doing that. He's getting his head taken off and feels like every time he catches the football and he gets up and he's celebrating. He caught the ball. So that's a good sign. And then the other thing, Josh, I did not like his effort in the blocking game, and he has really improved as a blocker. And I want to just, remind everybody who forgot, Terrence Ferguson missed almost all of camp. Like, he was dealing with an injury, missed almost all of camp. You're playing tight end. That to me is the toughest position a rookie can play, because you're not just playing tight end, you're playing offensive line too. It's an offensive line wide receiver hybrid. That's what a tight end is, especially in 2026. So Terrence Ferguson, they could have just been like, nope, you're Gerald Everett. We're going to focus on you as a receiver. You're not going to block. And he's really blocked quite a bit, and he's blocked very well. And you can see he's really worked on those mechanics. So he, to me, like, having him back this week isn't being talked about nearly enough. That's going to be a huge help in the receiving game. I think we looked at him as kind of like a novelty. Oh my God, Terrence Ferguson caught a touchdown, our second round pick. He wasn't supposed to be a part of this team, whatever. But now I think people are starting to see, or at least hopefully, towards the end of the season when he was playing, I mean, this guy can really decide a win. Like, he can win you a game. I mean, he's a mismatch. And when you have him with Nakua and Adams, I mean, I think you have your number 3 receiver that they currently don't have.
Yeah. And again, this is all health permitting, because as we know, hamstring is a weird injury. I just don't know what it is, but we really don't know how badly that's impacting him. But if he's healthy and out there, I believe that he will have a great impact.
Yeah, and that'll be important in this one. Looking at the pass catchers on the field, EPA per play, I love that you do this. Never seen any of these type of charts before, so these are really impressive stuff. You're taking the instance of the tight ends and the wide receivers, who's on the field, and you're trying to find a correlation between, like, the EPA, expected points added per play, and who's on the field when that happens. And I love that because, again, I've never seen this before until you did it. Kyle Monangai is the number 1 target in the best EPA per play output. Now, there's only 30 instances as opposed to 121 right there. But Durham Smythe, DJ Moore, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Rome Odunze, Zaccheaus has some build to him. Like, he can block. And I don't think everybody realizes that. So Kyle Monangai being the favorite target there doesn't surprise me. This is predominantly a run personnel, I would say. But then you look at this one here, Durham Smythe, Olamide Zaccheaus, Cole Kmet, and Luther Burden. And the EPA per play is impressive, and Burden's been 40% targeted. This just feels like, I don't know, man. It just kind of feels like it's one of those ones where they're trying to bait you to think that they're going to run the football, and then they hit you with the big play, Luther Burden. But what are your thoughts on that instance there, number 2?
Yeah, just to clarify, these instances also include running plays. So these are just the players on the field. So when you see a lot of these successful plays, these are running personnel players. And not only are they going to run the ball well with these players, but when they decide to pass with running personnel on the field, they're going to have success. And you see this a lot with 13 personnel. We have running personnel, or what it looks like, and you throw the ball. The Bears do the exact same thing. They just don't run 13 personnel, but they have running players that are block well in the run, that support the run game, but can also break out and catch a pass. And I believe that the Bears specifically involve their running backs more in the pass game than the Rams do. And that's why you see Kyle Monangai right there as a favorite target in the most successful instance, because they're going to use their running backs and they're going to have them spill out and catch a quick pass for 5 yards.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the Olamide Zaccheaus one is really interesting, although we've seen him. He gets open over the middle of the field. He's a good red zone threat as well because he can just create separation. Yeah, I mean, it's truly fascinating to see how many of these guys are listed, and DJ Moore is not one of those favorite targets. And when you think of DJ Moore, people would just assume 1,200 yard receiver, number 1 receiver on the team. They traded a boatload to get him. Pretty much gave the Panthers, aforementioned Bryce Young, to go and get him. But at the same time, it's like, where is he? He's not on here. I find it interesting as well. You could argue, Luther Burden, Loveland, Roma Dunze, and DJ Moore would be the most powerful set that you could have. And that has a negative 0.015 EPA. So yeah, it's interesting. I think the third one, we're going to see a decent amount. I think we're going to see it in the red zone. That's when they've used it. Zacchaeus had a touchdown last week. I think that's kind of when they're going to use that. But that should be interesting. I understand they don't really think, and I remember before the season, Luther Burden, he's made huge strides, and obviously that was like my guy in the draft. But I don't think that necessarily they feel comfortable running their offense exactly how they run it with Luther Burden as they do with Olamide Zacchaeus. But I think Luther Burden gives you kind of that boomer bust play that you want in your back pocket in case you need it. And you feel like more often than not, he's going to come down with the football. So that's kind of that. I mean, he had 120 yards against the 49ers, one of the last games of the year. So that was a big game for him. The Rams, the Rams have a 0.57 EPA, which, by the way, they had 0.38. That was the highest of any instance. This one, they have 0.57 with Parkinson, Adams, Smith, and Nakua. Interesting here. I wonder if it would be the same if they had Atwell over Smith. I kind of feel like it would. Smith is essentially taking the top off the defense. He can create that that clear out guy, and then you have Adams kind of over the middle. You got Puka Nakua. Maybe you line him up in the in the backfield like they did against Carolina, or you could line him up and have him go through the B gap and run a route. They've done a lot of different things with that, but they've had a lot of success with Parkinson on the field, and we get on him for his drops, but he's had some huge catches. And who knows if they even win last week without Parkinson? I don't think they do. That was a hell of a catch. But looking at this, what's the one that really stands out to you the most? Because there's a lot of instances here, but there's also a pretty hefty deal of instances when it comes to a lot of these. Whereas, over here, I mean, you got 29, 25, 25, 30, 30. Whereas the Rams, you have a lot here. You have a 95, 92. So yeah, what do you take away from the Rams side of things?
When you look at the best instances on the field, they either one have Puka Nakua or they have Devontae Adams. And that's what you need to know. That this Rams offense, although we have weapons at every position, at the end of the day, this offense relies on those two players. And I don't think you need both of them on the field, but I think at all times you should have a conceded effort to have one of those players on the field. And Devontae Adams coming back from his injury, I think he'll play better this week than he did last week. But when you look at the top five, their favorite target is either Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams. So all these players make plays, but at the end of the day, Stafford knows where he's going to on these plays. And it just so happens that if Puka or Devontae are not open, then he'll go to a secondary player, Terrence Ferguson, Xavier Smith.
Yeah, I like that. I also love seeing Terrence Ferguson in the second instance there and the fourth. So that's those combinations. That's huge. And I don't think Davis Allen would be in my favorite wide receiver tight end combinations. I like him, but I think my favorite would probably be, if I had to decide, I'd probably go with Parkinson. I'd probably go with I would go with Higbee, Ferguson. I'd go with Adams. I'd go with Nakua. I'd feel pretty good about that. Yeah, something along those lines. I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree.
So we move on to the offensive line comparison with Benedette and Dotson. Now, this is interesting because both players are expected to play. Dotson is coming back from an injury, and Benedette is taking over the spot that he had previously before he lost the job to Trapilo. Trapilo is out for the season. So, looking at this, the EPA per rush, it looks as though the highest here is Coleman, Shelton, Dotson, Jackson, Avila, and McClendon. Now, that does not at all surprise me. When Dotson is not in, they have a negative here. which also does not surprise me. But looking at the EPA per pass, I understand not as many snaps, and this is the exact offensive line that they had against the Seahawks when they put up almost 600 offensive yards. So that could very well be playing into this here. But that's still impressive nonetheless. And you could already see, I mean, this passing attack, this rushing attack, I mean, it's above average, no matter how you slice it, way above average, I guess, EPA per pass when Dotson's on the field. And so you see the EPA per play. This is a good offensive line for the Bears. It's not quite on the level of the Rams. And you see Benedette here, you could argue, is a little bit better than Trapilo. They run less, but, that is that. What are your thoughts when you look at this? Because my biggest takeaway is that the Rams offensive line, I think, is better. I think it's more consistent. And welcome back, Kevin Dotson. You were needed in the run game.
Yeah, when you look at a player like Dedich, he was actually able to get a lot of snaps over the season. I do think him in the lineup, pass protection is okay. I don't know if it's the greatest, but it's survivable. Without Kevin Dotson, though, the run game struggles, and this is just almost immediate. It shows up on tape. It shows up in the numbers. Kevin Dotson is needed to have the level of success, one of the all-time run success teams of the last decade. You need Kevin Dotson in order to clarify that. And when you look at the same thing for the Bears, there is a difference in run performance. And I think that's the biggest thing you see when there's one offensive lineman out. When there's one offensive lineman out, I do think in pass protection, they're able to chip, they're able to help out in some way, double team. I don't think that's a problem for most offenses, but what you see is the struggle in the run game. Because one player and not doing their role in the run game can turn up the whole run. It could cause a tackle for loss. It could cause a fumble. Anything is possible when one person doesn't do their job. And that's what you need to know for this type of scenario. Obviously, just because these are correlated, that does not mean it's because of the player, but it's definitely something to note, and that these players are going to improve the running game.
So you could argue that the Bears are better off with Benedette over Trapilo.
100%.
So that's interesting. And I did see Bears talking about that. On the field, you have a 5.01 yards per carry average and a 52.7 success rate for Kevin Dotson. But when he's off the field, the 4.36 yards per carry and a 40.6 success rate. That is insane. And it makes a huge difference. And it's not really a surprise because anybody that knows football knows Kevin Dotson is becoming one of the best, if not the best, run blocking guard in the game. Looking at the defensive line. And this is where I think the Rams are leaps and bounds ahead. And you can already see the yards per carry average here, 29th. 27 success rate allowed. The Rams are 17th. That's gone up considerably because of the Bijan Robinson game. And then, of course, the Seattle game. But success rate allowed is still low at 6th. And now they got Quentin Lake back. And isn't it funny we talked about the idea of Quentin Lake being back and a healthy Puna Ford would make all the difference in the run game. And they stifled the Panthers. They absolutely stifled the run game. I went through, there's a pattern. Dave Canales abandons the run if he doesn't get it going early on. Like he tries it out, and if he has it, he keeps doing it. But against the Packers, for instance, like I don't think it was the Packers. It was the game that they lost. I think it was to the Bills. Abandoned the run early on, and it ends up being a blowout. And then they abandoned the run against the Saints. And so you look at the Rams and the way that they are stopping the run when Quentin Lake is in there, it's significant. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. But this pass rush here, impact of multiple players with a pressure on a play. We talked about this off air. I want you to really kind of present this because this is all you. I give you props. I think this is a really good discovery here that the Rams are not a team that just one guy. This isn't Aaron Donald anymore. It's not just one Aaron Donald pressure can wreck an entire play. The Rams typically need 2+ defenders to do it. But what are your biggest takeaways from that?
Yeah, when we look at pressures, I know there's a lot of concern from people that think this isn't a real stat. Well, it is. It is definitely a real stat. But the problem is, what does it lead to? And when you look at how this Rams team is formed, the emphasis is in the front four. Our coverage is a liability, just straight up. So when you look at 177 pressures on plays where only one player gets a pressure, so whether that be Byron Young or Jared Verse, but out of all the remaining playoff teams, they have the worst EPA per play on pressure. So they're getting the pressure, but it doesn't lead to anything. And obviously, the coverage is a liability, so they're able to get the ball out and make a completion. But when you look at when there's more than one player getting a pressure, so whether it's two players, Byron Young and Jared Verse on a single play, that's when you see the best defensive performance is when you have two defenders. So 74 times you've had 2+ defenders getting a pressure on the field, and they've only allowed a 14.9 offensive success rate. That is amazing. Only the Texans have better at 11.3%. But then again, the Rams have more pressures with two players on the field getting a pressure by 62 from the Texans and 74 from the Rams.
See, I wonder, because I've been very vocal about this. I wonder how much the stunts are hurting them. Like, how much are they hurting them? We saw a really good example of this, is what I've been talking about. Because I've said Chris Shula has abused the stunt button, abused it. And 2024, they had the highest success rate of any team using stunts in their pass rush. And this year, it just doesn't feel like they're having that same success. And it's gotten a little chaotic. Like, it almost reminds me, almost. I'm not quite on that level yet, but it almost reminds me of Greg Williams blitzing both safeties, not having any safety help back there, just being a psychopath, that whole thing, right? You saw it, a perfect example of how stunts, when used right, you watch the Texans, they do it well. Brian Flores, when I think of stunts and pass rush, I think of Brian Flores defenses, right? That's what I think of. But when not used well, it can just be chaotic and can honestly hurt your case. And so they used Byron Young on the stunt against the Panthers in the red zone. And he just misses. Like, he's now, because he just did a stunt and he runs into the guy or whatever, he totally misses Bryce Young. He's out of the play. There's nobody there, and Bryce Young just waltzes his way in the end zone. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Like, I like stunts. I love the idea of making it really hard for offensive linemen to mentally process what's going on and kind of freak out your quarterback and start hearing footsteps and all of that and mess up the pass protection, your blitz pickup from the running back. But at the same time, I think the Rams have done too many of them, and I think that's why the 2+ defenders here, I think they're having more success, because that one defender, a lot of those stunt plays, they're getting one pressure. They're getting one pressure. So all that means is now, if they get that one pressure, and as you can see here, they're still giving up a 42.4% success rate, which is the highest among all of these teams except for the Bears. Those are guys that are now out of the play. Case in point, Byron Young was completely out of that play and had no chance of stopping Bryce Young. So yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because like, when I watch the film, it is evident they are not getting the same success stunting in the pass rush area like they did last year. And I think it's been a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, and one of the biggest concerns last year with Jared Verse was containing. You don't always need to win your rep, but you need to stay where you belong, or otherwise the quarterback is going to go where you were supposed to be. And I feel like it's the same thing with stunts. Stunts work if they work, but if they don't, you're out of position, and that leaves the quarterback room to leave the pocket. And so that is the one downside of stunts, is that if you don't succeed on the stunt, if you don't get pressure from both stunting players, is that now the quarterback has somewhere to go. And that's the biggest concern, and that's what you see. And so someone like Caleb Williams, who loves to leave the pocket, if you give him the opportunity to leave the pocket, he will never say no to that. Stunts can be dangerous for a player like that, because if you're stunting, Caleb Williams sees a wide open lane to run, he will do it. And maybe not even run, but leave the pocket and throw downfield. As we saw in that 4th and 8, that was miraculous. But there was a reason why he was able to wait that long to throw the ball, because he left the pocket, he went left, and he waited for Rome Odunze to get down the field. I believe that was the player that caught that pass. So, yeah.
Yeah. I wish they'd calm down on that a little bit, because we've seen quite a few of them where, yeah, it's just chaos. Like it's not even the good chaos. Like you're watching Byron Young run into Jared Verse sometimes, or Jared Verse running into Braden Fisk. Like it's not even productive chaos. So yeah, I'm not saying it's every time, but the fact that it can even happen, and again, I don't know if this is a game I'm trying to do that. you know, Bryce Young made you pay on some of those plays. I don't know if I'm doing it with arguably a better quarterback in Caleb Williams. So, how much damage do the pressures do? And this is a really good one here that you got. It looks to me like Grady Jarrett is a wrecking ball. Like when he gets in, his presence is felt. Montez Sweat, Austin Booker, they do a lot. So they don't get nearly as much pressure as the Rams do. But that also could be because it's EPA per pressure, so it's fewer pressures. So, I mean, that could also play a role in that. But yeah, what do you take away from this? Because, I mean, I know Rams fans looking at this are probably like, the Rams have a way better pass rush, I thought. Why is their EPA per pressure almost all of them lower than the Bears?
That's a great question. And what I want to start, EPA is associated with the play. So a lot of the times, even if the pressure is there, the coverage is a liability. And so they're able to make a completion, stand in the pocket, take the pressure, and deliver downfield. And that's what you see. There's pressure, but it doesn't exactly turn into results. And that's not necessarily the fault of the defensive lineman, because of the coverage liability. But at times, if it takes too long to pressure, that could also be a concern. Again, if Caleb Williams throws the ball at one of the highest rates time, so it takes him a long time to do it. So I think that's a pro for our defensive linemen. But at the same time, you do see that the Rams are getting more pressure, and they have more players who can get pressure. I have written here 7 players on the Rams with 15 plus pressures on this list. And there's 5 here, but again, one of them is out for the season. So there's definitely a better defensive lineman, but the EPA isn't necessarily correlated to their play.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think it's still crazy that Byron Young and Jared Verse have that much of an EPA per pressure when they have as many pressures as they do. And, you know, I think Kobe Turner's playing his best football of his career right now. I really do. I think he's playing on a whole other level. Perfect timing. Needed that. So, yeah, Dio is out for the year. Big loss, by the way. That was a great signing. Kind of liked him on the Rams as kind of like replacing the Michael Hoyt role. But sure enough, they found Desjuan Johnson replace the Michael Hoyt role.
Yeah.
So we move. You know, like you mentioned there, 7 players on the Rams with 15 plus pressures expected to play, 4 on the Bears. I would say Austin Booker. It's not just, you know, my Kansas Jayhawk lineage or whatever. He's really playing well. I think he had 6 or 7 pressures last week. Montez Sweat has always been a problem. He's really athletic. He can be the chase down guy. And we've seen Matthew Stafford. He has those moments where it's like, oh, I'm going to take off and, oh, I'm not going to take off and run. Yeah, Montez Sweat is not going to allow you to do that. That's for damn sure. Looking at the DBs and the linebackers here, this is some interesting stuff here. So yards per coverage, it looks like Darius Williams is leading the team. Obviously, Akello is out for the year and had limited amount of snaps here, but Darius Williams is leading the game essentially. What do you take away from, you know, this chart right here?
Yeah, so let me just explain what yards per coverage snap is. So basically, Next Gen Stats charts how many times a player is responsible for defending in coverage. So as you can see here, Kobe Durant with 476 snaps, where his primary role was to defend in coverage. And so what we're doing here is we're taking the amount of yards that each player allowed, and we're dividing it by how many snaps that they filled. So Kobe Durant, that is a great number for the amount of snaps that he's played. And it's basically, I think it's the largest on the list. Forbes is close. Actually, Forbes is greater. Um, but that's impressive. Kobe Durant. And I know at times he's been burnt bad, 446 yards allowed. That's probably close to the most on this list. But at the end of the day, he has also a lot of snaps. So there's got to be context to these numbers because if you're on the field more, there's a chance you're going to be targeted more. And it's just not fair to compare just from a yards allowed perspective. You need to put context into how many yards they're typically allowing.
The interesting one is Nashawn Wright. Watching him this year, he can be a game breaker. He can come down with the interception, the tough one, but he also gives up the touchdowns, and he's almost given up 700 yards. He seems like a guy that you might want to go after in this one for sure. And I think he's also a guy that the Bears probably want you to go after in this one because Dennis Allen is fine. Like I said, like he's banking on one of these guys coming down with the football. That's how they play defense. They're trying to be chaotic. They're trying to force turnovers, and it's really as simple as that. Then as far as the safeties go, now Quentin Lake is basically a corner safety, whatever you want to call him. That would be the highest among the corners. And then you have Cam Kinchin's yards per coverage snap. What's so fascinating to me is Cam Kinchin's looked like he was becoming a star right before our eyes. Yeah. And now, like the last, I would say 6 games, he just doesn't even seem like the same player. He's still a very good tackler. Form tackling, all that. He can hit you hard. But I haven't been impressed with him in coverage lately. He's given up 3 touchdowns. Curl gave up a touchdown this past week. And then you have Kevin Byard, who gave up 6 touchdowns this year, 7 interceptions. He's always been kind of that ball hawk. I mean, he's been one of the best safeties. I mean, not anymore, but back when he was in Tennessee, he was one of the best safeties in the NFL. And so you see the natural ball skills have never left him. But at the same time, he's still giving up the touchdowns, and he's starting to get up there in age, and not having a bad year considering, he has 7 picks, but he is because he's given up 6 touchdowns. And then Brisker here, this is wild to me because, and this actually, case in point, shows the biggest issue with the Bears. The corners actually aren't the biggest issue. Nashawn Wright gives up a lot of touchdowns, and that's fair. But Jalen Johnson does his thing, and so does Kyler Gordon and so forth. The safeties are giving up 13 touchdowns this season. And Brisker isn't giving you the interceptions. He's more so giving you the run support. Brisker's always been that kind of run supportive. You want to look at him like a Chuck Clark, Adrian Amos. There you go. He's that type of player. But they're not giving up 7 touchdowns, right? So that is something there. And the Rams have been known to pick on safeties when they feel like they can. And Stafford, I mean, he night and day can do that. So I love this because it kind of goes to show you here, like, yeah, the yards per coverage snap, like it matters, but at the same time, like these two have given up 13 touchdowns in the back end of the secondary. And everybody's complaining about the Rams secondary. The Bears, well, they might be getting a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because of these big names here in Byard and Brisker. But giving up 13 touchdowns, that's a lot, Josh.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think Brisker and Lake, they are oriented in run defense. With Quentin Lake returning, the longest rush allowed was by Bryce Young, a scramble, 16 yards. And then the next longest was 9 yards. No running back got over 10 yards against the Rams, and in part because of Quentin Lake. Yes, he did struggle in coverage, and you see it here, the coverage yards allowed. But these players are tasked to play well in run defense. So again, there is context, like you mentioned, that's important to note in these types of players.
No, I like that. And then linebackers here. So this is interesting because this is a former Saint in DeMarco Jackson who he hasn't played a ton, but he's going to fill in for TJ Edwards. And honestly, he's looking better than TJ Edwards when he's in there. It almost feels like, even though they have some season-ending injuries, the Bears do, they might actually be better off with the guys that are playing over them. They're paying a lot to TJ Edwards. He's still a good player in his own right, and probably more so for the run I don't really view him as kind of a coverage linebacker. But Jackson is a crazy good athlete. So I'm going to rescind what I said about him being out, TJ Edwards being out and being easier to run against. I think Jackson's going to make it a little bit tougher. But you look at Byron Young with 121 coverage snaps. That's kind of wild. What do you take away from this list? I mean, I know people are going to immediately go over to Landman and see the 4 touchdowns and be like, what the hell? He's been picked on lately by Rams fans. But, what say you? What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think the goal of any great offensive coordinator is to get your best player on a linebacker. And that's what Sean McVay has done. That's in his bag. Puka Nacua lined up in the backfield as a running back against the Carolina Panthers, and it almost looked too easy. He ran in for the touchdown, no considerable threat to that being stopped. And so, again, these linebackers are going to be targeted on every play. They will motion Puka Nacua to make sure that he is on one of these players, and that's just what's going to happen. And when you look at Nate Landman, the same thing. Every other offense is going to look at who is that player who, again, he's probably better in the run defense, who is a liability in coverage. Doesn't mean he's bad, but he's the liability out of all the players that are out there. And so a touchdown, you're in the red zone at most points. So it's going to be shorter distance, and you're going to have someone quicker who can go against Landman and get in for a touchdown. And that's why you see 4 touchdowns right there.
That's a really good way to put it, and I totally agree. Edmonds, by the way, crazy good athlete. He's always been a crazy good athlete coming out of college. I believe it was Virginia Tech with his brother. I believe it was Terrell and Tremaine. Really good athlete. You got 4 interceptions there. He's given up 2 touchdowns. I don't think this is a linebacker room the Rams should be scared of. I think you look at Jackson and he could have a huge game in this one. Kind of reminiscent to, you have the linebacker who unfortunately is out for the year, Bethune for the 49ers. He could be like that guy, kind of filling in a pinch and having a really good outcome. But I don't think any of these guys the Rams should be scared of per se. And then this one is interesting. So week 19 nearest defender allowed. So week 19, of course, you're referencing the Carolina Panthers game.
Yes.
And you're referencing the Chicago Bears Packers game. Looking at this, it's a lot of color coding and all this. What's your biggest takeaway here? Because right away, I kind of gravitate towards this right here. And I catch rate over expected, I believe it is. And
yes,
Omar Spates had himself a really good game from the way this is charted. So what say you, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to me when I look at the Rams is Quentin Lake. He struggled there. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 99 yards allowed. That's just not great. But again, this is your first game back from a 6-week injury or something around that 6-7 weeks. So that is not a total surprise to me. I mean, you haven't played against real players in a long time. You're playing against scout team and whoever is available when you're on the sideline getting back towards your injury. So that is not my biggest concern moving forward. But again, catch rate over expected is interesting to see. Jalen McCullough has the highest out of Wild Card Weekend. But a lot of the Bears players are in positive. So their players are catching passes over what a model would expect. And again, Omar Spates being that low, they only targeted him 1 time. And they expected that to be a catch, and it wasn't. So that's why you see that metric right there. And only on 28 snaps, which is still not bad, but it's not as much as some other Rams that you see on this list.
I was surprised to see Jackson, who I just raved about athletically, 6 yards of average separation. Now, of course, linebackers, it gets a little weird. You're not like matching up, playing bump and run like a corner, but 6 yards is 6 yards. 6.5 for Nate Landman. I mean, it's there. I guess it's better than being a corner that's giving up 3.6, but at the same time, call me crazy, I like the way Forbes played on Saturday. I really didn't have an issue with it. I was worried his confidence was shot going up against a team that just toasted him for 2 touchdowns. But I thought he played pretty well. My biggest issue was Kobe Durant in this game, and he comes away with a better passer rating, which I just find hilarious because of the interception and everything. But Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I would say there. And then overall team versus team comparison, the red zone, the Rams 5 drives, 80% touchdown rate. This is wild to me. The Bears were held to a 40% touchdown rate on 5 drives in the red zone against the Packers. That's not even something I really thought about. And then the Rams 80 drives first, 65% touchdown rate, which is seventh. Bears have 60 drives, which is 16th, and a 57% touchdown rate, which is 15th. The Rams defense in the red zone, 50% touchdown. So you flip a coin whether or not the Rams are going to give up a touchdown when defenses get into the red zone. They got a 21% turnover rate, which I find very fascinating because you would think about this team who's leading the league in takeaways, and they actually have an 8% fewer takeaway rate in the or turnover rate in the red zone. So I find that really interesting. And they're giving up 58% of touchdowns. Road and home, at home, LA, we're not really going to care about that because LA is not at home. So let's look at the Bears here. 9th offense, 14th defense. On the road, the Rams are 2nd offense and 10th defense. And the missed tackles, I love this because I think this encapsulates kind of what I was seeing. They did a really nice job of kind of minimizing the missed tackles. And then I think they all kind of showed up over the course of time when Quentin Lake was out, and especially when Josh Wallace was out. I think guys were out of position, having Jalen McCullough play in a more significant role than he's played. And I think we saw that. And I think that was kind of the icing on the cake for a guy like Bijan Robinson, who can make one guy miss and he's gone. So that's kind of how I look at that. But that's everything. So, Josh, this has been awesome. Really appreciate you, doing all this and putting all this together. It's a lot of work, and, I don't take it for granted. Let's wrap it up by talking about how we think this game's going to go.
Yeah. And the weather, I do believe, is a factor. But I think that people are making it seem like a bigger factor than it is. The one thing that you want to look out for in a game like this, when the weather is impacting the ground might be frozen, you're going to look at fumbles. And offensively, you look at Kyron Williams on the Rams. He has fumbled in the past in big games. But on the defensive side, you look at Nate Landman causing a fumble, right? And again, the Bears defense is this feast or break defense. They're going to feast as well. And I think I would put a lot of money, but I wouldn't do it. But if I were to put money, I would put money on one of these teams having a fumble, because that's what you see in cold weather. That's just what's going to show up. I don't think that there's really any other issues that we should look out for in the weather. I think the fumbling is the issue, and I think it might be harder to block in frozen land. And other than that, I do believe this game can be high scoring. But at the same time, I'm not surprised if it is, and I believe it could go either way. And I think 100% it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, as we know, because McVay and Stafford, again, they're number one in the fourth quarter in overtime in ranking. This is just a thing. But Caleb Williams, he's number 3. So these two teams and their quarterbacks are best when it comes down to the final moments at the last part of the game. So that's what we're going to see. We're going to see this game end in the fourth quarter, final minutes or even final seconds, a game-winning field goal. That's on the line. The fourth quarter is going to be one of the most entertaining quarters, if all goes to plan, of the entire postseason.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy to say. I feel like the Rams are going to win this game 27-23. I typically like to keep them right around where they're, expected to score in terms of like betting odds and whatnot. And this is about a 3.5 to 4.5 point, thing. When it closes, it might be at 4.5. I don't know, but I like to be like right underneath that. And I think the Rams I'm not saying that they're not capable of putting up 40 plus points against the secondary. That's not what I'm saying. But would I anticipate, would I expect that with the cold? No. I do think it'll be a factor, but I think it benefits the Rams more than it benefits the Bears. And the reason being is because everyone's making it out to be, well, the Bears are at home. Well, that's all fine and dandy. Caleb Williams just needed everything in the kitchen sink to find a way to win his first playoff game. Matthew Stafford is 6-2 with the LA Rams in playoff games with a Super Bowl win. So he's been there, done that. They had to come back and win a game where, let's be honest, they controlled at the beginning of the game. They got off to a quick start. Chicago just doesn't get off to those starts. They take a bit to get going, and sometimes it's too little too late, and we've seen that. They've lost. They barely beat the worst team in the league in the Raiders. They've had some games where you're like, what is going on? But, they have also taken care of business when they've needed to. That said, in this type of weather, there's only one game that Caleb Williams played in, and that was the game that they barely won and took everything in the kitchen sink to beat the Packers with their backup quarterback in Malik Willis. I think it's being overblown, and if it snows, I think it benefits the Rams because it neutralizes Caleb Williams' mobility. So I got 27-23. I think the Rams are probably looking at, a 27-16 affair, and the Bears get a touchdown at the end and kind of have a chance maybe in an onside kick with some time. But I think the Rams are going to hold it off, and I think they'll move on to the NFC Championship game, a spot they have not been since they won the Super Bowl. So this is the closest that they've come since they won the Super Bowl to getting back, and I think this is the year. I've been saying it all year. I think this is the year they do it. So yeah, those are my thoughts. We got some super chats, so I'm going to quickly do that, and then we got Sleeper. We got Alex, Double X Alex, appreciate you, member for 41 months. Jake and Josh, greater than Drake and Josh. Oh, man. It's funny because
that's funny.
My mom used to call Drake and Josh Jake and Drosh all the time. She just would get them mixed up. So that just reminded me of that. Appreciate you, Alex. Dylan, thank you for the 5. Whoa, congrats, Jake, on getting Cooper Kupp to join your show. Wow. So you're Cooper Kupp now, I guess. I don't know.
Big compliment.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Melissa, for the 5. I love this team. V8 legacy game, full confidence. Don't care if it's 20 below. Go Rams. 31-24 Rams. I like that score. I like any score that has the Rams winning. They go in 10-6. I don't care. As long as you're telling me that they're moving on, I get to watch more football. I get to cover this team another week. I'm good. And then we got Steve becoming a member. Appreciate you, Steve. Much love. And last but not least, we have Sleeper, which, of course, you guys can get in on the action. Use the code JKB. It'll get a 100% bonus match up to $100. Using that code, you'll also be eligible to get a $20 free entry, which will be available without a deposit required at sign-up. And if you have an account and just haven't used it, it's collecting dust, you might have a $20 entry there. Sam Darnold's also a freebie, so if you start your Sleeper Slip right now or today or tomorrow, whatever, Sam Darnold is a freebie at 0.5 yards. He's going to have more than that unless he doesn't play. Then I don't know what happens there. But, well, I guess you just hit the below on that. I don't know. But definitely check that out. Some guys that I'm really looking at, Devontae Adams, I think is going to have a big game. And I think Colston Loveland. So I think those are two guys that you can put in your slip. But that is Sleeper. Again, check out the sponsor. Link is in the description below. JKB is the code. Man, another ultimate preview for a Rams playoff game. We're going to do another ultimate one. Should the Rams move on next week? Should Josh have the time to do it? I know you're a busy man. You got time?
I got time. Let's do it.
All right. So the Rams pull this off. If they move on the NFC Championship game, whether they're hosting it against the 49ers or going to Seattle to play the Seattle Seahawks, we will have another ultimate preview. But Jake and Josh have the Rams winning this one in Chicago. Drop your comments below. Hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the like button and check out all of Josh's stuff over at Joshios Tweets on Twitter. Be sure to follow him for more incredible content, and we'll see you guys next time.